Okay, we have scheduled to do Phaladeepika chapter 14 texts 11 and 10, which will pull together the concepts from last week's stream, which was Phaladipika 14, 1 through 9, and add a bit about the health ramifications of houses. So let me just quickly review, super quick review of the previous sections, because it's really going to nicely and simply illustrate this first thing that he said. The first thing that he said was Rogasya chintam api roga bhava stithair grahir vavya mrthya samsthai Rogeshwarina pitadan vitair va dvitradi sangvad avashad vadantu. Disease is discerned from planets in houses 6, 8, and 12, or from planets affecting the sixth lord. Be certain about a prediction when at least two factors point to it. So it's a very simple system that he has set up. If you have planets in the 6th, 8th, or 12th, they show how you're weak. They show what troubles you. But it's not like they walk into the store and each one of them spends all their money. So like if the moon represents, let's see, he says, for example, the sun represents excess acidity and the moon represents coma. Moon, coma, fatigue, pneumonia. Sun, excess acidity, untreatable fever, seizures, heart failure. So let's say you have the sun in the 6th and the moon in the 8th. Is he saying that this indicates you have excess acidity, untreatable fever, seizures, heart failure, coma, fatigue, pneumonia? No. He's saying this last part of what he said is really the important thing. Dvitiryadi samvad avashad vadantu. Oh, I'm so thirsty. I should have brought something to drink. If that means when there's two or more indications of the same thing, that is what surely happens. So, for example, if you have the sun in the 6th and the moon in the 8th, both of them indicate fever, a kind of fever. Moon indicates chills and sun indicates fever. So then you probably are afflicted by fever. Feverish diseases, the diseases that are marked by fever. So that was his basic concept in 1 through 9. And then he just gave the list of diseases per planet. Now what he's going to do today, he's going to show how certain houses are also involved to show physical locations of things. And he's going to illustrate what he means by two or more. And it's done in the typical way by describing yogas, or a certain example configuration. That's what a yoga is. It's an illustrative example configuration of things in a chart. So let's take a look. It's really, simple and logical. So he starts with this one. Mandaran vito ikshite vyadhane chandraruno chakshiruk. If the sun and the moon are in the 12th and the 2nd, aspected by Saturn and Mars, there's vision disorder. So what is he saying? If the sun and the moon, this is just really clearly illustrating Dvitiryadi samvadavashad vadantu. that if there's more than one indicator, two or more indicators of the same thing gives surety of the effect. He's illustrating that. So you take the sun. What's one of the things that the sun affects? Look. Disease is associated with Saturn. Disease is associated with Mercury. Disease is associated with Mars. Disease is associated with the sun. Vision problems. Right? Is it also listed for the moon? It should be. It's not listed for the moon, but it should be. Because the sun and the moon are the two eyes. So vision problem for the sun, vision problems for the moon, at least as a secondary or support. And then the 12th and the 2nd, those houses are the eyes. So he's taking a planet like the sun, and that has to do with vision problems, and he's putting it in the 12th or the 2nd that has to do with eyes. And that's how you get Tvitir Yadi, two indications of the same thing. And he's putting it with the moon, which is a backup, so you're getting 3. And he's saying if you have the sun in the 2nd and the moon in the 12th, or vice versa, if you have both eyes affected, then you have 4 indicators of vision problems. And then he says on top of this, he says something very important that he didn't really explicitly say yet. Mandaranvito ikshite. If they're aspected by Saturn and Mars. Otherwise, sun in the 2nd house probably indicates strong vision. Sun in the 2nd, moon in the 2nd, strong vision. Maybe sun in the 12th by itself has nothing towards it. That means good vision. The moon in the 12th or the sun in the 12th, vision disorders become more likely. But if you put sun or moon in the 2nd, but under bad circumstances, which is symbolized or summarized by the words Mandara Anvitikshita, just aspected by malefics or influenced by malefics, then you have the symbol of vision in the house of the eyes being injured by the influence of a malefic. The astrology talks to you. It talks to us when you understand its language. You just have to be humble and respectful to the astrology itself, to understand its language and not be more intelligent than it. You know, have you ever talked to somebody who knows what you're saying before you say it, but the problem is they don't know what you're saying? They know what they would say. They know their motives. They know what they think. It's very annoying. It's very frustrating to try to talk to a person like that because they're not humble. They don't wait for you to explain yourself. They jump to conclusions about you. Well, don't have that relationship to astrology. Have a humble attitude. Listen carefully to it. Understand the basics. And realize that you don't understand the basics. So be eager to understand the basics better. And then all of a sudden, everything just starts showing itself to you and talking to you. Something like this is just obvious. The sun, the symbol of vision in the house of the eye under the influence of a malefic, is actually not something you have to read. It's something that says something to you. It's coming out and saying, my vision is injured. Thank you for the comment, Aries. Now, here's the next one. Now, the next of his, sorry for the sniffles. This is what is happening at the end of COVID. You just get like clogged pipes. The next thing that he's going to say is, all of the next things that he's going to say are just on the same template with different examples. So watch what he says next. Shoryangiraso yamas Shoryangiraso yam Shoryar sorry. Shoryangiraso. This is not right, is it? Shomyangiraso Yamana Sahita Drish. What is this line? It's incorrect. Let me just figure out what the incorrectness is. Mandaran vito ikshite vyayadhane chandrarunau chakshiruk soryangirasoyam. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the Devanagari vision right here to look at, but it's readable. He's saying if you have Mars and Saturn, and they are, yeah, I remember this one. Where the hell is Jupiter? There's some typo. If you have Mars and Saturn, but they're aspecting Jupiter, Mars and Saturn aspecting Jupiter in the 3rd or 11th, it's hearing disorder, Shrotaruk. So look, it's the same exact template as before. He said vision disorder, sun or moon in 12 or 2 aspected by malefics. What was that? That was just eyes plus eyes plus eyes plus problems equals eye problems. Now he's saying Jupiter plus 3 or 11 plus malefic equals ear problems, hearing problems. Why? Jupiter's hearing, 3rd house is ears, 11th house is ears. So you have hearing plus ears plus problems equals hearing problems. It's that simple. It's that simple. But if you do this faithfully, this is the thing I noticed. If you make a solution, like if you say x plus 3 equals 5, you can figure out that x is 2, right? And also x minus 3 equals -1. Then it works because x is 2, and in both cases. So you know x is 2. You have confidence about that. You have to have that kind of mentality when trying to learn something or discover something or test something. There has to be consistency to your solution. This is why it's really good to try to make astrological reports that are actually worth something. This is why it's actually good to try to make a computer give a good interpretation. Because a computer can't do anything except the exact system. It won't bend. It has no bias. It has no intuition or like recognition. At least these regular computers that we have. There's no intuition or awareness of implications. They just know literal definitions. And so if you can make something work through a computer, then you got your system down pat. So it's the same exact thing, right? Sun and moon in the 12th or 2nd aspected by malefics equals a problem in the vision. Jupiter in 3 and 11 aspected by malefics equals a problem in the hearing. Stephanie wants to know which eyes. It's getting too exact. But they say that the chart is basically looking at you, which is why on wheels they put the ascendant on the left. That's why. So the chart is basically looking at you. So houses two, that side, the underground side of the houses would be the right side of a person, and over ground side, the upper hemisphere, is the left side of a person. I did not extensively study this, and I can't remember where I have actually heard it from, but this is just the general, like, common opinion about things, that the chart's looking at you. So if it's sun and moon in the second house, aspected by a malefic, it's supposed to mean that the vision problem mostly affects the right eye. And it's the same thing. If it's the third house, then it's mostly the right ear. If it's 11th house, then it's mostly the left ear. And whether or not the planets themselves carry that symbolism, I also don't know that. Maybe you'll find somebody say that the sun is the left side, the right side, whatever. Moon is the left side. Moon would kind of make more sense as the left side. Sun is the right side, because of the nature of the two sides. But I haven't really heard that described. You might be getting too exact. All right, let's see what the third one is. Same template with a different coloring. So grey panchama be bhavet udara rugrandhrari nathanvite. So it's actually slightly different. Here he says the 6th or the 8th lord in the 5th with a malefic equals stomach disorder. So he's showing you a slightly different template. The previous templates were take a planet that symbolizes something. For example, Jupiter symbolizes hearing, and put it in a house that symbolizes the same thing. For example, the 11th house symbolizes ears, and put it in distress. For example, put it under the influence of a malefic, and then you get hearing problems. Now he's saying you don't necessarily have to have a planet that inherently symbolizes something. You just take a planet that indicates disease. So for example, the 6th lord or even the 8th lord. Put them in a house that symbolizes a part of the body and add a malefic there. So put the planet, the lord of disease, in a particular part of the body while in distress. Put it in distress, for example, under the influence of a malefic. Then it indicates medical problems to that part of the body. For example, Shogre Panchamabe, if you have in the 5th house with a Ugra, with a malefic, Randhrari Nathanva. If you have the 6th or the 8th lord in the 5th house with a malefic, then you get Udara Rug, abdominal problems, stomach problems. Because that's where the 5th house is at. And if that happens to be the 7th or the 8th, it's bowel disorder. Or genital reproductive disorders. If there's Venus in the picture. So just to clarify this again. Tadvat saptama naidanesa. Saptama is the 7th, Naidana is the 8th. Tatvat means that previous situation, which is the 6th or the 8th lord with a malefic. Okay? Tatvat, 6th or the 8th lord with a malefic, Saptama Naidane, in the 7th or 8th, is Gudaruk. That's like excrement problems, bowel disorders. Crohn's disease, dysentery, constipation, diarrhea, stuff like that. But if that planet is Venus, so like if Venus is the 6th lord or the 8th lord and it's in the 7th and not the 8th, you have to remember basics. So if it's the 8th lord in the 8th house, even though you're matching a particular rule, that rule just wasn't being... See, this is where you're not a computer. You're at least AI. You have the ability to learn. So you can remember also that the people taught us that its own lord in its own house won't injure the house. So take Venus as the lord of the 6th and put it in the 7th or the 8th. That is, and then distress it. Put it in distress. That's the very important part. Put it in distress. The more distress, the more acute the problem. And then it indicates reproductive disorders. Okay? So, how's he going to continue on in the next text? He's going to give other examples of other planets in the 6th and 8th. Or just planets in the 6th and 8th. Put a planet in the 6th or the 8th house with the malefic. Influenced by malefic. Shashtar ke pyatavashtame jvara bayam bome chaketo pranam. Sun in the 6th or 8th is fevers. So that was basic, right? The sun represents fevers. 6th or 8th, when it's in a malefic situation, and it can indicate problems for the fevers. Iris says, I have Mars in the 11th house, and as an adult, I have had an ongoing battle with you. So that's not exactly the match to what he said. But hopefully you find somehow you realize that Mars is also influencing your Jupiter. That would be exactly what he said. Almost exactly what he said. Exactly what he said is Jupiter in the 11th or 3rd, aspected by a malefic. So someone says, well, I have Mars in the 11th and I have hearing problems. But that's not really exactly what he said. I mean, you're learning something about what he said for sure. So, but to make it match what he said, you want to see one or two things. Mars should be influenced by Saturn. Or let's see, Mars, there's a 4th house aspect. So from 11, that goes to 2, so that doesn't work. But maybe if Mars is really on the degree of the ascendant in the 11th house, by the way, whole sign houses are important to use, then it would give 75% aspect to the 3rd house as well. So what you're looking for, what he's really teaching is Dvityat-bi. You have more than one indicator. Or if you're looking at, maybe Jupiter is not in the 3rd or the 11th house, but the malefic is, and it's influencing Jupiter as well. Jupiter might be across from it, or Jupiter, like for Mars, it could be anywhere from the 7th to the 8th angle. It could be near the 4th angle. Or anything close to those. It's a significant aspect for Mars. You understand that? So now this new thing is Shashti in the 8th house. 6th house. Shashtyar ke piva vashtame. Or in the 8th house. The sun, Arka. Jarabayam. The fevers. Bome. If it's Bome chaketo vranam. If it's with Mars or K2, it's ulcer. So this is interesting. Mars and K2, really. It could be and or. Cha sometimes indicates or. Sometimes. So this is an interesting look into what K2 does medically. And it'll be interesting to compare this to what Rahu does medically, which is coming up very soon, today. So what K2 does, just in abstract, is pulls things down and in. So K2 has the nature of digging holes and drilling. So what Ketu does medically is like drills your body. It puts holes in your body. And it burns your body inward. So it creates those things, those horrible things in the body. Like I don't know what the word abscess means, but I think it's the correct word. Sounds right. Like where part of your tissue wall breaks and then things spill out. Like blood can spill out of broken veins, or acids can spill out from the stomach into the rest of your body and do a lot of problems. So that's how Ketu works, especially if it's aggravated by Mars. So he said, put Ketu in a house that indicates disease and aggravated by Mars. They burn inward. So they get holes, especially if Sun is there as well. Or some other planet that indicates health. So I remember, actually, was Sidereal? No, Sidereal was really wacky. In tropical, I almost have this. I have Sun, Mars, very close together in Leo, the 8th sign, and fairly close to Ketu, but Ketu is over in the 9th sign, not the 9th sign, the 8th sign from Capricorn. So in the 9th sign from Capricorn, it's over in Virgo, so it makes it over to the 9th house. I don't have problems really with the stomach acids, ulcers, things like that. Probably because Ketu and Mars are blind to each other at that angle. All right. The next thing he says is Shukre Kuhyarujam Kshayam Suragurao Mande Chavatamayam. So now he's just going to say put the other planets in that same situation. If it's Venus in the 6th or the 8th under the influence of Malefic, the primary thing is reproductive problems. If it's Jupiter, the primary thing is digestive disorders, which is Kshaya, which means things like anorexia. Yeah, digestive problems or problems. Could even be diabetes. Could be part of the complication. Where you can't Jupiter is for transforming things into sugars. That's even why it's about hearing, because it's about taking in sound and transforming it into something that you can store in your mind, learning. So when it comes in through the mouth, and it's about taking in food and changing it into fat. So if Jupiter is in the ill health configuration, then that's how ill health manifests. Helen Keller, let's look at her. But you have to be careful with diagnosis, just like anything else. To be good at any kind of specialization, you have to actually be good at the specialization. If astrology is your diagnostic tool, then you need to be good at astrology, of course, to be able to use the diagnostic tool. But you have to be good at both the diagnostic tool and the specialization. Otherwise, you won't understand how to use the diagnostic tool. So, for example, like if you want to do financial astrology, I never touch financial astrology. I hope he never talks about it. Because I don't know how to deal with money. I just know super basic theoretical things about money and economics and all that business. Even I know astrology well, very well, but I will never do financial astrology because I don't understand the specialization. So I won't recognize what the symbols are really saying. Same way, medical astrology, you do need to be a doctor to use medical astrology correctly. You can't just be a hobbyist and expect to have better results than doctors get consistently. You won't. But if you're a doctor, meaning you understand medicine and you understand the body, then you can use this very effectively. So for example, with Helen Keller, what diagnosis are you actually expecting? Even doctors can't figure out what happened to her. They don't know what happened to her. They speculate, they write papers about how did this happen? What disease was it? How did she lose those faculties? So what kind of analysis, what kind of diagnostic will you get from your astrology on Helen Keller? You would probably get something, injury to the nervous system by fever. Probably. So it's probably like a lot of stuff in the 8th and the 6th, influenced with malefics, etc., indicating like a feverish disease that has a lot of side effect. So you can't just say, well, this person is blind and they don't have the sun in the 2nd house, so the system doesn't work. You have to understand medicine, that the blindness could be blindness, or the blindness can be a complication of something else. That's how the body works. That's how life works. So you have to try to figure out what's the symptom and what's the cause. The astrology will indicate to you the cause of the illness. And if you look carefully at it, it will indicate the symptoms of it. But if you're looking for the symptom as if it's the cause, then the diagnostic tool will confuse you. This is interesting. 3 solar sorcerers. 3 says, I have Venus, Sun and Venus, 8th house, Aries. And K2 Jupiter, 1st house, Virgo. I don't understand that. Is it tropical and whole sign houses? Because if it was 2nd house, it would be much more indicated that it would dry out your eyes. Okay, so if it's with Venus in the 6th, then it's reproductive disease. If it's Jupiter, it's digestive. Or Saturn, nervous. That's what Vata Maya really means. Vata is the Ayurvedic property of circulation, and so it's the blood circulation, not really, because that's fluid circulation. That's how Vata is interacting with Kapha to make the blood flow. But the pure Vata circulation in the body is the respiratory, and yeah, you can put this in, and the nervous system. And he's got 2 more lines. Now this is interesting. I said that Rahau bhaumanirikshite chapilakam sendau shanau gulmajam. If it's Rahu aspected by Mars, external ulcers, this thing called pilaka. Or if it's Saindu Shani Gulmajam, if it's Saturn and the Moon, then you have problems with the bloods and the blood cells. So let's look at that one at a time. But it's quite interesting compared to Ketu and Sun. Ketu and Mars versus Rahu and Mars. We get that picture in this verse. Ketu and Mars was ulcer. Rahu and Mars is this thing, is external ulcers. So really, Node and Mars is ulcer. Ketu is internal ulcer. Rahu is external ulcer. What do you mean, like external ulcer? Pilaka is where your skin erupts, like boils, blisters, abscesses on the skin. Just bad skin, diseased skin. Pilakam. So that's really interesting. And how the simple principles work. Ketu always takes things in, Rahu always pushes things out, and they both eat or burn, especially if they're with the Sun and Mars. Saturn and Moon, there you get your blood cells. So that, remember what we were talking about with just 2 seconds ago? Saturn and Vata Maya. What's the Vata? Vata is the circulation, but the fluid circulation or the blood, if you pair Saturn and Moon, then it indicates the fluid circulatory, the blood system. But if you don't pair Saturn with Moon, then it doesn't indicate the fluid circulatory. It represents the air and electric circulatory, air and fire circulatory, which is respiratory and nervous. So Saturn and Moon, you get irregularities in the blood composition. So it affects the organ that deals with that is the spleen. Let's see if we can figure out Helen Keller, since I think we have a few minutes. Let me set it up. I'll grab her chart and then we'll look at it. This one last thing here is Kshinandao Jala Peshupapa Sahite. This is a little bit of a new idea he's bringing in. Kshinandao Jala Peshupapa Sahite Tatstem Purogam Kshayam. The waning moon. Kshinandu will give you kshaya. Well, things like anorexia. If the moon is thinning, then your fat and your water is thinning. Waning moon in water signs. Or it could be swelling. Like, I think it's a problem with the water retention affecting the digestion. It's if the moon is also in a water sign. That's your principle of dvitiryadi. If you have two or more of the same thing, then you're sure that it indicates that. So the moon has to do with waters and kapha, the water element in the body. And if it's jalabhesh inside a water sign, then it's water plus water. Papa sahite. So if it's water plus distressed, if it's with a malefic, then you have problems with your water. Amburoga, problems with your water. And kshaya, you decay because of the problems with the water. So it's all kind of water retention, water regulation. It's similar to the Jupiter problem. But instead of directly affecting fat, it's affecting waters. All right. Are you sure about Helen Keller? Her birth time? Let's check it. I think I have her chart. Let me tell you what I have. Helen Keller. I have June 27th, 1880, 4 p.m. Sounds like an approximation. Tuscumbia, Alabama, USA. Since it's in my chart, it means that somebody somewhere indicated it was a double. Since it's in my database, it means it was AA rating. But let's confirm that. Maybe I got it wrong. Helen Keller birth chart. This gives you the rating. The rating is A. Yeah, the rating is A. So it's like from the mother's memory or something, or from the father's. It's a pretty solid birth time. Relatively solid. Maybe it's not exact. Probably it's not. It's 4 o'clock. But it's roughly that time. This is 4 p.m., by the way. All right, so let's take a look at this chart. Let me see if I can get it onto the screen. Maybe 30 seconds or so. And where did these things disappear? Here we go. Let's get a window. Sorry. But we'll do Helen Keller's chart when I get this right. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Bam. Here we go. So, what do we see here? Debilitated Saturn with Jupiter in the 6th house. So you have a debilitated malefic in the 6th house. My eyes are a little bit bad. 1 second. My eyes are a little bit bad, but you wouldn't notice in my chart probably that my eyes are bad because it's just natural badness of old age. You have to be careful to understand the medicine, the medical side of the thing. Okay, anyway, Helen Keller, 8th Lord. Let me kind of move this over to the side a little bit. Bam. And maybe I can move this. Kind of get myself out of the way, potentially. Nah, you can't do that. No, don't make me smaller. Hang on a second. Okay, we're going to deal with it like this. That's how we deal with the chart. All right. So what did we say so far? The 8th Lord is with a malefic in the 10th house. Look at the 8th Lord is also lousy. How lousy is the 8th Lord? Look carefully. The 8th Lord is at 0 degrees. That's not good. The 8th Lord is at 0 degrees of Leo. That's very not good. Why? Because Leo is a fire sign. If you're at 0 degrees of a fire sign, that means you're touching fire and water at the same time. So that's called Gandanta. It's the most difficult border. So the 8th Lord is in the Gandanta. In it. Not close to it, but on it. Sharing sign with Mars. Meanwhile, K2, where's the moon? 5th. It's basically the Jupiter in the 6th house is aspecting your 1st Lord. And the 8th Lord is also in the Gandanta in the same house as your 1st Lord. And Mars, the malefic, Lord of the 6th house, is with the Lord of the 8th house in the 10th house. And Mars is also aspecting directly, powerfully, the 1st, the ascendant. So it's the 8th Lord, the 6th Lord in the 10th house, carried to the ascendant. From the 6th house, Jupiter, the debilitated 2nd Lord, not debilitated itself, but affected by the debilitated malefic, 2nd Lord is aspecting the 1st Lord by its 5th aspect. So that is not a healthy person. This is a direly not healthy person. How do you see the direness of it? It's by Saturn's debilitation in the sixth combined with Mercury's Gandanta with the sixth lord. Then on top of that, it's Venus and the Sun with Ketu. How do you know that the disease will affect perceptions like hearing and vision? Look at it really carefully and think about what I just said. So what I just said is the direness of this chart is that Saturn is debilitated. Saturn debilitated is not pretty. Like Mercury debilitated, Venus debilitated, it's not great. But Saturn debilitated is really tough. And Saturn debilitated in the sixth house, affecting Jupiter, is pretty serious. At 27 degrees, when the ascendant is like, I can't see with my eyes, but 25, 23, 25. So this Saturn is really indicative of a serious medical problem. Plus, the eighth lord Mercury is seriously on Gandanta with the sixth lord into 10th house, as carrying its influence to the first by having the sixth lord's aspect go to the first. Okay, so I said Saturn and Mercury are the real hallmarks of a serious mental problem. Well, what houses do they own? Besides they're owning the 6th and the 8th, they own the 3rd and 11th. Those are the ears. And Jupiter is in the 6th. Jupiter is the planet for hearing. And Jupiter in the 6th is influenced by a malefic. That's signature for the hearing problem. For vision, Jupiter owns the 2nd. Venus owns the 12th. So Jupiter owning the 2nd, we already know is in problems, being in the 6th house with Saturn. Venus is not as bad. But it's also the 12th lord, right? So the sun is in the 9th house, which is nice, but it's the vision affected by Ketu and the 12th lord. Right? So that's how you can read Helen Keller's chart. I'm just noticing a lot of her nakshatras. I mean, if you did a nakshatra report on this woman, Sun Ardra, Mars Ashlesha, Venus Ardra, Saturn Ashwini. That explains the recovery. Kind of miraculous recovery. And Ketu Ardra. So it's like Ardra, Ashlesha, Ardra. Sun, Venus, and Ketu are really close together. And they're all in Ardra. So there's your blindness. She also has Shakata Yoga, which is a difficult yoga. What is the Kendra's? Oh, Kendra is empty for everything except the 8th and the 6th lord. So that's how you do it. Navamsha, bam. If this is an accurate birth time, it seems so. At least from first glance at this Navamsha, because Rahu rising in Aquarius. Okay. Let me see if there's any questions there. You guys, can you see yourself? Where is her Gulika? who knows? Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Welcome to the infinite regress. Let's make it move. Let's see how long it takes to move. Now you guys can see how much lag there is. But you see how much it took between the first layer moving and the second layer moving. Now the third layer is starting to move. So that's like the amount of time it takes between I say any questions, and by the time you hear me say any questions, it's from this thing moving to the next thing moving. That much time. And then you have to type it in. Is there an indicator of problems with joints? There is. Wasn't that yesterday? Let me check. Indicator of a problem with joints. This will probably be the only question I can answer because I got to run out to a meeting. Joints. There was something, frankly, I think it was Saturn. It's not listed here. So what I would say is think about what is a joint. A joint is bones connected by ligament and the cushiony stuff in between the cushiony stuff and the ligament is kapha, so it will be damaged by vata or pitta. So joints are really the stretchiness of the body, how well the body moves. So you find it will be enhanced or protected by watery planets like Jupiter, Moon, and Venus. I mean, that they will basically protect everything because that's basically the construction of the body. And the bones. I think there was something in here about joints, and the bone, and it will be harmed by fiery planets like Mars, or dry planets like the Sun. That doesn't really give you much. I thought we had something about the joints, but apparently we don't. Let me check my other document. Find joint. Not found. They didn't mention it. If I see anything, I will let you know. Okay, guys, I gotta go. Thanks, everybody.